Righto guys, you're back with the Castaway couple. And you're in luck. We've got a really cool video for you guys going on today. We're going to show you exactly how to install a solar system on your house from scratch, from start to finish. So all the racking for the solar system for the roof has just arrived this morning. So check it out, here it is. So we've got our black rails, a little bit of heavy duty conduit there, some DC solar cable, and then all the racking stuff is inside this box. So we'll rip it out, we'll have a look at what's going on in there. So this is for a tin roof. For those of you who have tile, you might miss out slightly, but it doesn't really change all that much, other than obviously the installation type when it comes to the tin and the way that it mounts. Probably a little bit more difficult to install the tile brackets, so unfortunately I won't get a chance to show you that today, but maybe in another video I can whip a spare one out and maybe give you a bit of an idea of how they work. So for people that are trying to be off grid and do this sort of thing themselves, I think this is going to be a very interesting video, and hopefully it can sort of help you understand how it works, that it's not that daunting, it doesn't need to be that intimidating, and you'll be able to tackle it yourself. So if you guys are like me and you're buying things piece by piece, doing it all bit by bit, there's no reason why you can't pre-wire your roof according to the solar panels you know you're going to be buying. And all it takes is just looking at the spec sheet. So you can go online, you can find the solar panel that you want and check out the spec sheet with the measurements for the panel. And even if you zoom in enough, you'll be able to see which side the positive and negatives are. So the way that the cables are laid out on the back of the panel, and then you can get all your cabling in place, ready to go once you buy your panels, they arrive and you're ready to put them on the roof. So jump up on the roof and measure up your solar layout. So I've selected these panels, 440 watt panels, TW96 cell, really nice all black panel, should look pretty good on the roof, and it gives you the measurement there. So you've got 1134 wide by 1762 long. And then if you really zoom in here, you've got your male plug here, which is your positive. So if I'm looking at the face of the panel, that would be on the left-hand side, as you can see there. And this is my female plug, which is my negative. So that one sits on the right-hand side, right here. So if you know your layout, if you know how you're going to be positioning your panels, which I will jump up on the roof and I'll show you exactly how to measure all that up soon, you can literally have your entire roof pre-wired, have all your plugs terminated on the end of your cable, and as soon as you lay your panels down, it's just a matter of pinning them down and plugging everything in. So it should work flawlessly now. So we're going to have a 6.6 kilowatt system, which is 15 panels times 440 watts each. So on the top, we're going to have a string of 7 in portrait. So if you guys are wondering what portrait and landscape means, well, portrait is the long end facing up, perpendicular to your roof, sorry, parallel to your roof, and then landscape is the panels just, well, sitting landscape, perpendicular to the length of your roof. So you can have, if you can't fit everything in portrait, let's say you don't have enough screw lines on your roof, sometimes you might actually be able to fit more by going landscape. So always double check your measurements and look at both options, because a lot of people will measure up in portrait and completely forget that they can actually go landscape, which means your rails are running this way instead of running this way according to your screw lines. So a lot of the time, to get yourself out of trouble, you can do all landscape arrangement, and you can probably fit more panels than what you would in portrait if you need to do so. It is easier and uses less material if you do go in portrait. Otherwise, you've just got rails running up and down your roof to try and fit, you know, fewer rows of, 3 or 4 going long ways. So you're using up a lot of material and a lot of rails instead of just having 2 that are connected like that, or 1, or however many. So that's my layout. We've got 7 up top and then 5 underneath, and then I can fit 2 in landscape underneath that. So my roof's not too big, and then I've got 1 on its own over here in portrait directly under this panel where this one starts. So the way we're going to string these when it comes to wiring is we're going to do 7 plus 1, so we're going to have 8. And what I'm going to do with these top ones is actually face them upside down that way. And then I'm going to face this one up, and we're going to put those on 1 string. So we're going to have 2 DC cables running up here. That's 1 string, and then my 5 in portrait and 2 in landscape will give me 7. So if you guys go back and have a look at our old video that we did, I can't remember what it's called, but I'll stick it somewhere here up in the corner in this video. I talked all about the specifications and how to measure and how to calculate your voltages, your currents, your resistances, so that you're within the spec range of your inverter and that everything's hunky-dory. So if you're looking for a more mathematical and an in-depth video on how to do that, go back and have a look at our channel, check that out. Well worth looking at. But today is going to be a hands-on practical video of how to actually install the gear. So now another important thing that I want to show you guys is our electricity bill. So in Queensland, for us at least, for the past few months, we haven't had a single bill thanks to the government subsidy. So they gave us a credit like they were doing to all Queenslanders. I don't know if it's the same anywhere else in the country, but it was the cost of living relief. So we were riding that for a fair few months. We didn't pay a single bill because we don't use a lot of electricity. So obviously some of you would have gone through it a lot quicker than some others. And this is important when it comes to sizing the size of your system and how many kilowatts you need. And forgive me for including this in the video because I don't want to make anybody seem silly, but there's a lot of people that really don't understand how to read their bill and to see what they're using on average per day. So I just want to quickly show you this. This was our most recent bill. We just used up our credits, so we used $116. We had $110 left from that cost of relief funding. So we paid $5.70. And now that we're back in the red again, I figured it's time to get solar on the roof. So somewhere on your bill you should have a graph like this that shows you an average monthly usage, and the most important one to look at here is your average daily usage this period, which was 8.18 kilowatt hours per day. So 8.18 kilowatt hours per day is what we used in the month of March, which is one of the lower months. So sometimes it goes up maybe double, let's say. So probably our worst month, which seems to be July when Jan's running the heater, goes up to about 16 kilowatt hours. And that's probably the heater running all day, all night, you know, most of the time, most of the day. So, and here in Queensland, we actually have really nice sunny winters. So it's the perfect time to offset that usage with a decent solar system. So, and I'm putting on a 6.6 kilowatt system. So basically in an hour and 15, hour and 20 minutes of full sunshine, I can pay off that daily usage. In 2 hours, I can pay off July's daily usage. Now in Queensland, probably our average sun days, like peak sun hours, in the low light months is probably 3.5 hours per day. So you times that by 6.6 kilowatts, or technically 5 because the inverter will be 5, but anyway, that's much of a muchness, neither here nor there. So you can generate 15 kilowatt hours in 3 hours. So you get 3.5, a little bit more than that. There's your offset done in the summer. You're probably looking at 5.5 to 6 hours, which is absolutely plenty. That's a little bit about how to read your bill and how to size up your solar system, which again, we covered in that previous video we did last year sometime. So let's go ahead, let's get all our tools ready, and let's jump on the roof and start getting into it. Righto, so what we really want to do is, again, we're going to have 7 panels on the very top, near the apex of the roof, 5 below, 1 sort of on its own beneath the 7, and then 2 in landscape. So if you don't see me, that's because I'm starting at that end. I want to push the panels as far as I can there, because behind me, that wall, that fence line converges a bit. So I'm going to have more shading there, even though it's going to be much of a muchness. The further I can push it to this east escarpment here, the more sunlight I'm going to get during the day. Tip number 1, use a tool belt, right? This is going to be your best friend for the job because you're going to be carrying quite a lot of small little bits such as your MC4 connectors. Deck tight, obviously you'll need more than one if you're doing multiple penetrations. Don't cheap out on these guys, all right? Get the best one that you possibly can. It's gonna cost you $2 or $3 more for one of these. In the grand scheme of things, it's not that expensive, and you want a good, solid, thick one, and do not use silicone, which is another thing I forgot. I'll have to whip down to Bunnings and get some Sikaflex. Always seal these up with 5/16 screws, roofing screws, and Sikaflex. Do not use silicone. Silicone will break up, degrade, and eventually you might end up getting a leak in your roof. So this is something that you do not want to cheap out on, and I see a lot of guys just using cheap deckies, real thin rubber with silicone, and see how this deck tight has a nice thick base around it here, and it's pretty tall. It's very unlikely for water to pull up high enough to leak up and over your conduit that's coming out of this and going into your roof. So yeah, easily missed, but very, very important. You will need a Stanley knife, cone bit or hole saw, whatever your preference is. I like cone bits. They're just easy to use. You can make all different size holes with them. So they're good. You'll need a 5/16 to remove your roofing screws. You will eventually need a 6mm hex. That's to pin your panels down. A 5mm as well for your earths and all your other little bits and pieces. And then a 3/8 bit to get your new 10-foot screws into the roof. So, and of course, impact driver, drill. You'll need cable ties, tape measure, Sharpie. Don't be afraid to make markings on the roof. It'll wash off, so don't sweat it too much. And then obviously your rack mounting kit with all your 10-foot fittings. So we'll open one of these up. So if your panels are 1134 wide, you also want to allow, when you're doing a calculation for your overall measurement, you want to allow the 25mm or whatever it is. Where's my tape measure? Yeah, you want to allow about the 15mm gap for the panels to butt up to the sides here. So this is what's going to sit in between your panels. So however many you have on the roof, if you have a string of 7, you add 15 times 7 on top of your final measurement. I like to add 20 to give myself some play, and then I'll add 60 on the very ends of both sides of the panels, just so I have a little bit of playroom. If I need to move my panel left or right a little bit, I'm not running short on rail and then having to join things later or replace it all together. It's always harder to join, so measure twice, cut once, guys. So we're going to start with our measurements. So we're going to do 7 panels by 1134. I don't know where my phone is. And then we're going to times our 20mm by 7 plus 120, 60 on each end. And that'll give us our total rail length, which we can pull up here, splice, cut, and install. So 8,198mm. So we're just going to go through, we're going to put our marks. So what I'm going to do is do 100mm short. I'm going to move 100mm that way, so I can have my tin feet sitting right under the panels where they won't be seen. So I just use the screw to hold my tape measure, and I just want to shift it across just that 100mm so everything's nice and hidden. So now that these panels are going to be nice and flush in a row, I can just go down and take out the screws. Depending on how many you've got, and for wind ratings, usually you want to take out maybe every 4th. Sometimes you can get away with every 5th, but you don't want spacing of greater than 1200mm. Usually you can get away with 1500 if you're in a really low wind area, somewhere where you're not going to have high category winds. We live on the escarpment, so the stronger the better. It's just a few extra 10 feet. So worth doing that part properly too. You don't want your panels flying off the roof. So it's just as easy as that. We might just have to push that way a little bit now from our final screw line here so that we can get to 5 panels. So from here we want 3460. That's where our third panel is going to end up. And then we wanted 5890 for the total. So we'll burn 60 mil. 5890 plus 60 is 5950. And then once we have our rail down, we'll come back, we'll find the center of the bottom 5, and then we'll evenly place the landscape panels facing center, moving out that way, just so it looks schmicko. Guys, just so you know, if you're ever doing vlogging, stick with an iPhone and a little gimbal, because what I'm using right now is just, it's kind of inconvenient. Anyway, so what we're gonna do here, here's our ladder, pull out a screw, like so, and what we're gonna do is we're going to put our 10 foot in, and we're going to use a strap to secure our ladder to the 10 foot just to give us a little bit more stability. Righto, sorry guys, it's really not working out with this camera and gimbal. It's kind of hard, but just to show you what I mean, that's all you need to do. Just stick one 10 foot in, strap your ladder up, and it doesn't really want to move. So as long as you got that stability there, you're safe to climb up and down. Righto, so once we've got our rail on the roof, you want to swap your bed out for the 6 mil, which is exactly what we're going to use to secure the rail to the feet. So one tip is with your bolt and your little tombstone here, the nut at the back, you want to have them out as far as the thread will allow without them falling off. Gives you a lot more play to get into the side of the rail, into this channel here, and then you should just be able to sort of wriggle it in there, bolt it up, and it should tighten up quite nicely. So it's been a while since I've done this. We'll see how I go with it. Now we grab our splicey and just sort of do this as you go. So you lay your rail out, chuck your joiners in, get your rail together, make sure they're around about halfway, and send it. Righto, now back to a quick update guys. So we've got our rails cut on the roof. And let's just jump up here so you guys can get a better picture of what's actually happening. We've got everything on. So there's our single panel here. String of 7 up the top, string of 5, and then the 2 in landscape that I'll have to do later. So I'm gonna duck out to the wholesaler and grab a few more feet. Hopefully they have enough on hand. Now what I recommend you doing when it comes to the cable run, obviously try to penetrate at your closest point. Now I know a lot of guys, they like to run the conduit first inside the roof, get a snake, and then try to pull the cable through. I've been doing this for 7 years guys. It's the biggest pain in the ass unless you have a perfectly straight run, which this sort of is, but as you can see my roof has all sorts of different pitches and angles and vertices on it, so you want to avoid that as much as possible. The best way to do that is to actually build the conduit on the ground. So what I did, I got a stick of conduit, came up here, and I sort of measured where it's going to penetrate, put the stick on the roof, went to the next part where it ended, measured it again, and then measured it again to where my inverter or switchboard are going to be. So I ended up having 2.5 sticks of conduit and a little bit of corrugated flex, and all I do is I just piece it together on the ground. I grab my cables, my earth, and my 2 twin DCs, and I feed them through the pre-cut length on the ground. Then I'll jump into the manhole, I'll push the conduit into the manhole once I've punched my hole, which I don't want to do yet, just in case it rains. So guys, don't go penetrating until you're absolutely certain you're going to be doing it. And you don't have to duck out and grab anything, because if it does rain between now and when I go to the shop, that'll spell trouble for my ceiling. So we don't want that. So yeah, we're gonna pop out here. So let's jump down and I'll show you the cable and what I've done there. So there it is, guys. There's my cable. Goes through a little bit of flexi where it's going to come out the hole. And I've run it along to here to a T, where I'll take my earth out and put a little one-hole gland on the end. Make sure that this is sealed, guys. Everything's glued, all your joins are glued. Legally, that's how it has to be. And this is what's going to go to my inverter, which will be in the corner there somewhere, and my switchboard's just back to back. So pretty straightforward, nice and easy run. Yeah, and this just makes pulling the cable through so much easier. Give yourselves a bit more slack so you're not running short, but build it here, throw it into the manhole, punch it out once you've done your hole, push that end straight out into the roof, put your deck tight on, Sikaflex it, screw it down, and Bob's your auntie. And another thing that I really like to do as well is, although I'm going to be penetrating there, and that's going to be one string, my next string is going to be over there. So some guys will pre-wire their roof and run their connection points back to the penetration point, but what I prefer to do, so I don't actually get confused with which cable's which, I'll make one shorter and one longer, and I'll actually run the longer cable along the rail that comes from the inverter to my second string, which is going to be my 5 on the bottom and my 2 landscape at the very bottom near the gutter there. That way there's no confusion which string I'm plugging into which tracker on the inverter. So you get no mix-ups and you get no weird values and results in your inverter. So that's just a surefire way that you don't mix up your strings between string 1 and string 2 and the 2 inputs on your inverter. I've made that mistake many times myself, and just to avoid making it in the future, I've started to run one cable much longer to where my next string is going to be. So you waste no more cable, you doesn't use any more, because either way you've got to run something back, so it really makes no difference. Actually, you save a pair of MC4s doing it this way, because you're going direct to that string and you can plug right into the panels rather than making jumper leads to go from the second string back to your penetration point. So yeah, this will actually probably save you a little bit of money doing it this way too. So now we've got our landscape rails there, where the panels are going to be placed in landscape, and then the rest is all portrait orientation. Now I've also decided I'm not going to do the pano today, just because some of these clouds are looking a little bit, how you going? I mean, the forecast says it's not supposed to rain, but it sort of looks a little bit rainy out over there. But anyway, so what I'm going to do is, I'm not going to make any holes. I'll just chuck the conduit and saddle it inside the ceiling space through the manhole and have it sitting here under the roof sheet ready. And then when the panels actually arrive, and I know I'm going to be paneling that day, that's when I'll just punch my hole, run my cable through, just fit the MC4s, the connections onto the end of those cables, fit off the earth into there, and call it a day. So I've done that one for now and zinc sprayed it, because it still might be 2 or 3 weeks before I get my panel, so I don't want that corroding between now and then. All you want to do is you want to have the opposite plug on your racking as opposed to your panel. So for example, now this can change between panel manufacturers. Most of the time, if you're looking at the cell side, the solar side of the panel, and you're looking at the top left, if it's facing upright, your positive plug is usually on the left. It can be on the right with some brands, but most of the time the positive is on the left, the negative is on the right. So that can change between panel brands, but what doesn't change is the plug. So your positive, your lead coming out of the panel, which is a positive, is always going to have a male head on it. That is a male head right here. And it's got a larger pin, I don't know if this camera's going to focus, but it's the fatter pin on the inside that you terminate. So your positive is on the panel is always going to be a male plug. And then your negative is going to be the opposite, just like this, with the slimmer pin inside. So what you want is, on your racking, you want the opposite for the same polarity, if that makes sense. So a positive on the panel, So this is a perfect example here. This is my string of 7, so the 5, and then the 2 in landscape, which will be facing inwards. This is going to be my very first point. So my panel is going to be upright. The top left corner is going to have a positive lead, which will have a male plug. So on my racking, I want to have a female plug. So obviously the 2 terminations can mate up. And then on the opposite end, this is my last panel on my top right. This is a negative lead coming out of the panel, which will have a female plug. So of course, I want the opposite. I want a positive plug on my cable on the racking. So obviously these terminations can mate. Now it sounds like it's pretty straightforward and easy, but when you start to look at your roof and how you're going to lay things out, it can get a little bit tricky. So for example, these panels here, the 5, are going to be upright. These are going to be upside down. That way, all I have to do is when I do my penetration from the inverter, my connections are going to be there because the bottom panel is going to be the right way up. All the top panels are going to be upside down. So I'm going to have a negative lead over on that side on the top and a positive lead on the left on the bottom, which gives me positive negative. So that's my first panel. That's my last panel. So that lead that you saw there is a return lead that goes to this. So because this panel is upside down, I'm going to have a positive male head on the positive side of the panel, plugging into this, taking my positive to my negative on that panel. So my inverter connection doesn't have to run out here. It can just pop out of the roof and go plug into those first 2 panels. Technically that one being my first, that one being my last. Hope you guys are with me, and I hope I'm explaining this right. Makes sense in my head, but like I said, it can be a little tricky. The easiest way to go about it is just try to create a loop. Even if you have to draw it out, just draw it out and just draw your panels, how many you're going to have, and just draw it. So that's upside down, so negative, positive, negative, positive, negative, positive, negative, positive, until you get to the end. What are you left with? You want the opposite plug on your racking, and then what's it going to be over there? Well, you want the opposite so that those terminations can mate. And that's pretty much as simple as it is. Now it gets a bit trickier when you have a landscape setup like this. So I don't know if I'm going to bother explaining that in this video because it's going to drag on a little bit. If you guys want a little bit more information about how landscape and portrait orientations can work together, then just drop a comment in the comment section below and let me know. But at this current stage, guys, that's all it is. We've got our earths. Now, some people are really picky with their earths and they try to, earth every single rail. The standards are open to interpretation. I personally feel as long as I've got one sort of within a group and I put enough earth tags under my panels, it's going to pierce the powder coating on all the rails, and it's going to continue that earth through the panels onto all my other rails. So as long as you've got one in a similar group, I've got one here on my landscape rail, which is coming from my portrait rail, which is continuous. I've got one there. I've skipped that one because I've put one down that end. So as long as I have my earth tags, it's going to continue that earth. I'll have continuity between all my rails. That's why I've got one on the top. As long as I put earth tags on the bottom and on the top, I'll probably just put them under the panels on all 4 sides there. We're not going to have an issue with earthing. And the way I verify that is just get your multimeter, put it onto ohms, it's called the beep test basically. Just set it to ohms, turn the sound on, bell out both your rails, scratch them down a bit so you're actually touching metal so it's conductive, and just see if you get a beep. If you get a beep, well, you know that your earth is continuous. It's as simple as that. So yeah, guys, I hope you enjoyed that video. A little bit of a rundown. I know it wasn't much, but I figured I'd get the camera out and at least, make the most of the opportunity to try and film something for you and make it somewhat informative. I know that my explanations aren't very nuanced and I do struggle to articulate what I want to say, especially when I'm doing something, but any questions, just drop them in the comments and I'll do my best to get back to you as soon as I can. I read all the comments And I do try to reply to every single one. If I miss any, I do apologize in advance, but just hit me up again and I'm sure I'll see it. So yeah, let's jump down and we'll see how far we get today. Righto everybody, I did decide to go ahead with it. So I've gotten quite lucky. Back to back with my switchboard, which is exactly where I want it. So I've punched a hole and I'll actually come down in through the switchboard. So I don't really need to run separate runs for the earth and for the DC itself. So I've got my tongue up there, hopefully I can find it in the roof. And I've just gone through the back here inside the switchboard. So I'll pass the cables through and I'll leave it sort of as is for now, just hanging out here. I'm still not too sure on what inverter I want to get. Probably going to go down the roads of a Sungrow hybrid. You can get Fronius. There are some inverters where you can literally come in right into the back. That way you don't see any of the ugly cables or plugs underneath. But a lot of them, they're just exposed right below the inverter. So you come out the wall and plug straight in and you have a little bit of a spaghetti mess of cables. You can make it look nice, but each to their own. Me personally, I'm not really fussed. I'm just gonna get whatever's financially the most viable and whatever makes the most sense at the time. So yeah, that's pretty much the game plan. And then I suppose when the rest is ready to go, I won't post this yet. I'll just put it all together, give you a start to finish full system. I guess that's sort of stage one. The roofing's done, the racking, the wiring is about to get done, and I'll catch up with you guys a bit later on. Righto guys, so it's a few weeks later now. I wasn't able to film all of the panel installation on the roof when we were putting them up. Unfortunately, we've had a little bit of bad weather over the past couple of weeks. It's only just started to get quite nice again, so I was in a rush trying to pick my moments when there was no rain so I could actually slap the panels up on the roof. But anyway, I thought I'd just do a quick little vlog just to finish off what we were discussing in the first segment of this video, and I'll stitch them both together so you end up with one complete video. Now, I end up going with a Sungrow inverter right here. This is a 5 kilowatt inverter. If you want to know the model number, it is just here. I don't know if it'll focus on that, but it's basically a Sungrow hybrid grid connect inverter SH5.0RS. And all the specifications are there. If you can't see them, then feel free to look it up online. So it took a little bit of umming and ahhing. We don't plan on staying at this property too much longer, so we are going to move on from here eventually. So the difference between a standard 5 kilowatt grid tie and this hybrid model is literally $1,000 difference. Now, I was umming and ahhing about it, whether or not it was worth it, but I knew that if I didn't go for the hybrid inverter, I'd probably be kicking myself. So I ended up pulling the trigger and getting this one. So the only difference is that it actually has direct battery capability. So there's a set of connections under there, you can see, where it can accommodate batteries. So no need to retrofit, no need to replace the inverter, it works straight away. Now another little feature that I didn't know that lately I think they've been implementing in modern inverters is that they have a direct DC to AC conversion. So that means that you don't need a set of batteries present for it to actually feed your house. If there is, for example, a power outage and there's enough sun, which on a day like this, I'm assuming there would be, then the inverter will supply, or the panels, sorry, will supply through the inverter an AC current for your house to use as the backup circuitry. So I've wired up the backup on this inverter to pretty much feed all the lights in the house and the back section of power, which includes my modem, my computers, the TV, and every other power point that's coming off that circuit in the back half. So most things stay on. I've rewired the fridge into that circuit so that the fridge stays running as well, which of course only helps me during the day because I don't have batteries. So if there's not enough juice, not enough sun, and we have a power outage at night, then we won't have backup. But I mean, maybe I'll consider getting batteries in the future. I don't know. We'll see if we're still here and if we live here long enough. Righto. So what I'm going to do is save my work. I'll leave the computer running. So this runs off the circuit that is also tied to the backup on the inverter. So after I show you sort of the finished result for the panels. We'll trip the main switch, we'll simulate a power outage, and we'll see if our backup circuit actually works directly off the panels and if everything stays on. So there's the layout that we had originally in our drawing, which I showed you at the beginning of this video. So we have our string of 8 at the top, sorry. I think there's 7 at the top, then there's 1 underneath, so I'll get around on that side and show you that soon. Then we have our string of 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and then the 2 in landscape below them. So that's basically string B, and then the 8, so the 7 and the 1, a string A. Let me just get around there and see if I can. So there's the single, string of 7 on top, making 8. So that's basically all it is, guys. So just as we planned, and remember, I did these measurements purely off of the online spec sheet for these panels that I found, and the measurements were dead accurate. I didn't have to adjust anything or redo anything here. I just installed my rails as per the layout that I had. When the panels came, chucked them on the roof and slapped them up. Now, they're not light. They do weigh a substantial amount, so if you do have a helper, if you can get yourself a helper, I definitely recommend you do so. Save your back carrying them up the ladder, which is what I did. Remember, I've been doing this for like 6 or 7 years, so for me it's not so bad, but at the same time that does carry a risk of injury, of a fall, and it's not really something safety-wise that I would recommend anybody doing. So be smart, don't do what I do. So if you can have a second person on the ground to pass the panels up to you, or you know, whatever, whether you're on the roof or they're on the roof, yeah, a heck of a lot easier that way. And if you've got a double story, well, you might need more than 2 people, sometimes 3, sometimes 4. So bearing that in mind, let's just see if our little backup circuit works. Honey, you done with the microwave? All right. So what I'll do now, I'll go to the board and I'll trip the power. So that's our inverter circuit there. Grid supply, main switch. So that's the main power line. And what I've done, this RCD, which runs these circuits, so 1 power and 2 lights, this is the one that's connected to the backup circuit on the inverter. So if I trip this, that essentially kills everything. And it should kill these if there's no power to them, but effectively the backup from the solar or from the batteries, whatever power source that you have connected to the inverter, possibly even a generator, which is also another option, it should in theory keep these running. So let's give it a go, right? Power should be dead. However, check it out. Garage lights are still running. Let's look at that, straight off of the solar panels. Let's check my computer. So as you can see, the oven is now off. We've got no juice at the oven. We'll have no juice at the cooktop. So all your heavy, high induction loads won't be running. Look at that, my amp is still going. My TV's running. And right now we've got no power at the house. So essentially if somebody comes, or if there's a storm or a disaster, or which we won't have any sun during storm anyway, so that's a stupid example, but just saying, in theory, if there is a power outage for whatever reason, but you've got enough sunlight and you've got enough juice on the panels, even without batteries present, you will still get a direct conversion of power from your panels from DC to AC via the inverter. So, you know, if I was working away here, doing a vlog, doing a video or whatever, and the power tripped, unless I looked at the oven, I wouldn't even notice, because all my lights are still on. So all the house lights, everything inside, outside, the entire property will remain on. And pretty much this half of the house minus the kitchen and the circuit for the fridge, which I've rewired to be on that circuit. So let's go stick the power back on, get everything up and running again. So there you have it, guys. That's pretty much the benefits of having a hybrid inverter. Now I know $1,000, yes, maybe, I don't know. It's a big difference from grid tie to hybrid, and honestly they look identical. There's no difference between how this looks and how the other one looks, other than This has battery backup. So it's got a backup input, or should I say an output, and it's got the inputs for the batteries, just those two MC4s. That's literally the only difference, and that's how much more it costs. So really up to you to determine whether or not that's worth it. Now, definitely do your research. Don't go off everything I've just told you in this video. There might be other stuff that's maybe more suited to you, other products or other things that you might want to use. You might not want to even go the solar and batteries route. You might just want to have generator as backup and then have a grid feed system that literally just sells that energy. So it's really up to you guys. But I just hope that this sort of gave you a really in-depth look into what's involved when it comes to installing a solar system. And yeah, I hope you guys liked it. If you have any questions, drop them in the comments for me. I'll do my best to answer, and like, share and subscribe if this video was valuable to you. Anyway guys, this is the Castaway couple. We'll see you on the next video.